Well, thank you, Joanne. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the overview of MBOLD and the work that the group is doing to continue to advance food and agriculture. And I also want to thank Shannon and Tamara for their insights on the Minnesota agri-food sector and the impact of COVID-19 on that sector and how many of our organizations are responding and demonstrating resiliency to the impacts of COVID. So their comments and the kickoff this morning by Tanner really provide an excellent background for our panel this morning, which is on building agri-food resiliency, COVID learnings from MBOLD leaders. As we heard from Tanner, we've experienced a lot of volatility this year, and it shows up in price levels and how food has moved through the various sectors of our food and agribusiness network. So there's no question that we are in challenging times that have called for bold leadership, for innovation, and for cooperation among all of the stakeholders in the agri-food chain. Today's panel is going to provide a great opportunity to hear from industry leaders about their experiences and their learnings from COVID-19, and to discuss what we in agri-food can do to improve the resiliency of our vital industry. So this morning we've asked each of our guests to share their insights on and key impacts of COVID-19 on their individual businesses, what they have learned from those challenges or opportunities, and how those learnings will improve either their firms or agri-food's future resiliency. So we're going to begin this morning with Doug Baker, who is CEO of Ecolab. Doug is chairman of the board and chief executive officer of Ecolab, the global leader in water, hygiene, and infection prevention solutions and services that protect people and vital resources. Doug joined Ecolab in 1989 following 7 years in brand management at Procter & Gamble. And so Doug, we thank you for joining us today and we welcome your thoughts.
Great, thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. Well, hello, everybody. I'm sorry we're not in person today, but that's a little bit the narrative, isn't it? So our business and our promise is really around cleaner, safer, healthier. And the way we deliver this is really through water technologies, food safety technologies, hygiene, and infection control. And our biggest business is food safety. And we are truly farm to fork, meaning we show up at dairy farms, poultry farms, et cetera. We're through processing. We are the largest, if you will, provider of food safety technology to the world's processing industry, touching over 36% of all food processed. We touch over 44% of fresh milk globally. So we have a large, important platform here. And obviously we saw a lot because when we say farm to fork, we extend beyond food and beverage processing into the restaurant, hospitality, and food retail industries. So when we see COVID, we saw a number of things. Certainly our food service business, our lodging business, and then our very small and even smaller cruise business got hammered. And those businesses were impacted dramatically. Our work there was really helping our customers pivot from dining room to takeout and or delivery. And we were successful doing that. In lodging, we had a number of interesting pivots where we had lodging customers open their hotels to healthcare workers, particularly in Manhattan. And we had to step up and try to help them change, if you will, every protocol so that they could do this quite safely, i.e. not infect their staff when you have a number of healthcare workers who are around COVID every day, so that they could continue to provide that service to healthcare workers going forward. I have story after story. So the most important learnings, I would say, that we've gone through is really preparation matters a great deal. And I think a lot of companies have seen this. So certainly a number of us have invested heavily in digital technology. We did so in the obvious ways, i.e. being able to connect workers as they worked remote. And I would say travel over the years has caused all of us to invest in that capability. It's never been tested like it's been tested during this period. So that investment proved wise. But we've also invested over $600 million of the last 5 years in investing, connecting our customers digitally. So we have over 40,000, if you will, sites that we are monitoring 24 hours a day through connection that we call 3DT using Ecolab 3D technology. We monitor this in Pune, India. We have engineers there 24 hours a day. And this has been critical because it's enabled us to continue to provide our customers insights, even in situations where no one outside their organization is allowed on premise. And so that investment has also proven quite important. I would say, if anything, we wish we had done more because this is an accelerant, if anything. So there's a lot of debate about what we're going to learn from COVID, what the lasting impact is going to be. I think personally, it will change things, but mostly what it's going to do is accelerate trends that were already in place. Trends around remote capabilities, trends around digitalization of industrial practices, et cetera, and those moves. And so I think from our vantage point, we've heavied up investment this year, even though this is going to be a tough year for us, given our exposure to food service and some of the other places. But the future comes, and we want to make sure we're prepared. Lastly, I will say, as a company, we understood that we really need different responses to different industries. So we have a big portfolio in acute care, i.e. hospitals and in life sciences, pharmaceutical plants, and the rest. Those businesses are up literally 50% this year, where I've got our food service business down 25%. So we have very different situations in the company. We are hiring people in the lodging and, in the hospital and the pharmaceutical industry businesses. We are not hiring in the food service businesses right now, but we are investing in all of them. But how you think, how you prepare industries, how you serve industries where you have maybe 10x demand in certain areas and you have reduced demand in others has been an interesting story in itself. And lastly, that gets me to supply chain. So our strategy in supply chain historically has been to make in the currencies we sell in, i.e. make locally. The real driver of that historically had been currency. We didn't want currency, i.e. foreign exchange, to become a strategic problem. So instead of saying all of our product is going to be dollar denominated, we would prefer to have it euro denominated or won denominated, RMB denominated, et cetera. So we produce in country wherever we can. It also is smart given the water content of much of our product. You don't want to ship this great distances either. And so this has served us well in both the tariff situation pre-COVID and in the COVID situation, where you had challenges, if you will, meeting some demand locally, et cetera. And we didn't want to be dependent on a long supply chain. But with that said, we still found a bunch of cracks. We found places that we were sole supply, but our supplier honestly has proved to be not a partner. They had huge demand run up and they've hammered us with price. What's our view? They are now on our list, which we will not be sole supply with these guys. And if I have anything to do with it, we won't be buying from them at all. We want to have trusted partners as we go through these challenging events. We don't want partners who look at opportunities and gouge people. And so it's a simple formula. We are in business with large companies, have been for decade after decade, typically without even a contract. And the basic understanding is we succeed when our customers succeed. We bring technology to our customers to help them do even better. And when they do better, we do better. And if you get this formula mixed up, you will have a great today, maybe even a great year, but you're going to have a lousy future. And so I would say it's reinforced our commitment to be a partner through thick or thin, to make sure we stand up for people, even when they're down, because food service will be back. Food retail will continue to progress. Food and beverage production will continue to need support through these times. And we got to make sure that we are there. So culturally, I would say it's reaffirmed some of our core values and proven we believe that they're the right values.
Well, thank you for your comments, Doug, and we look forward to asking you some questions later. Our next panelist is Heather ANFANG. Heather is Senior Vice President of U.S. Dairy Foods at Land O'Lakes. Heather oversees strategic and commercial activities in the dairy retail and food service businesses, partners to drive overall brand health, and encourages continued engagement and development of team members within the dairy foods business. Heather, thank you for being with us today, and we look forward to your comments.
Great. Thank you, Rod, and thank you to the Agrigrowth group and Tamara for having me on today. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I know Land O'Lakes is a longtime member of Agrigrowth, and so special shout out to my colleague, Tom Wegner, who sits on the board. I'm excited to be here. Again, I'm Heather ANFANG. I have had the honor and privilege of being a member of the Land O'Lakes team for 21 years. I lead our food service and retail division of dairy foods. And so as we step back and think about resiliency, the topic of the panel, and what we have learned today or this year, I think it's always good to step back and reflect on what 2020 has brought to all of us. And if a year ago at this time, we told ourselves what 2020 had in store, we would not have believed it, right? It's hard to wrap your head around all that we've gone through. And so I think that's always important to step back and reflect on that. But before we talk about the impacts and learnings, I just want to step back and talk a little bit about Land O'Lakes. Because I think it helps to tell the story. As many of you know, we're a farmer-owned cooperative. And so that means that one of our core missions is to take our members' milk and provide market access for it. And we're also a branded consumer goods company. And so we're looking at the market and what's happening in the market and insights and developing products that meet consumer needs and customer needs. And so that intersection of both the supply forward and the marketplace back is really where Land O'Lakes lives. And so when COVID hits and you think about the immediate impact, what happens is we're in the spring flush where milk production is at the highest point of the year. And about half of milk in the country, as a generalization, goes into that food service channel. So products that are produced for retail, restaurants, schools, lodging, hotels, cruise ships, all of that, right? And so you think about that, 50% of your outlet is gone in an instant. And the milk is still coming, right? So we like to say the cows don't care that we're working from home. And so what are we going to do? And so that was the immediate impact. And I think it was interesting and confusing for consumers when they heard messages around farmers dumping milk or destroying crops. And at the same time, they're seeing the empty shelves at the grocery store. And so how does that all come together? So milk, as we know, is highly perishable. We need to do something with it right away. And so we're trying to move it around in the supply chain. And Land O'Lakes did what many manufacturers have done in this instance, is we sold retail products or food service products into retail. We created new products. We cut our production of all the items that we produce so that we were focused on the most efficient production to do two things: move more milk through our plants, as well as get more product out so that we have the right product on the shelves. So it really was this huge puzzle of where's the milk, where's the need, what's the capital structure, how to move it all around. And so that has been just incredible agility that the teams have undertaken. And so when we think about, well, what are the learnings of that? I think that we still are very much in this place. We're still very much moving around the milk and understanding that impact. But long term, what do we think really sticks? And I think for us, as we think about products and trends, and as consumers have shifted in home, and how will cooking and baking, will that stick? Will consumers change their behaviors? As we think about products like, we sell a 5-pound loaf of American cheese to the delis in New York. We quickly shifted to pre-packaging that cheese, pre-sliced into the deli bag. And will that change, permanently? E-commerce, as we think about that, e-commerce has been an area for perishable grocery and for dairy that has really lagged general merchandise, and that has taken a huge step change. And so how does that change over time more permanently? And how do we think about our product set going through those channels, as well as any new products or packaging configurations? So lots of learnings that we're dealing with in the short term, and also thinking through in the long term, how will that change in the future, and how will we ready our product portfolio to meet that need? The second thing I would say, like an immediate impact of COVID, was really about employee safety. How are we going to keep our employees safe in this environment? And of course, we did all the things like zoned our plants. So if one part of the plant had to go down, not the entire plant didn't have to go down. Social distancing, the PPE, the temperature taking, the contact tracing, and all of that is still very much happening as surges in different parts of the country continue to happen. And so we have been so fortunate in the ability to keep our plants running and have all of those standard operating procedures really work in our benefit to keep the product moving, keep the milk flowing, keep our frontline employees safe, and keep product going through the supply chain to ultimately get to the consumers. But again, as you think about the learnings of this, there has been much, I think, we have learned about our ability to do in the virtual environment. That a year ago, I think if you asked us, we would have said, well, I don't know that we can do it that way. So for someone like me, who's an office worker, easy to pick up and move home, right? Not easy necessarily, but easier, and to set up office at my home. Much more difficult to do things that we've been able to successfully do, like virtual R&D trials at our plants, virtual plant audits, virtual approval of new co-packers. All of these things that I think we thought maybe we wouldn't be able to do. So as we think about how will we work going forward, I think there is a lot of learning to be had. Certainly we've had very successful customer meetings, a little harder when you're doing sampling of product, but we can still make it work. So I think these days of traveling 2 days for a 2-hour meeting are probably behind us. We have become much more efficient in how we think about conducting business in this environment, which is a huge opportunity, I think, for us to think about. And then the last thing I really wanted to talk about was, and it was referred to in the last presentation, was around the rural broadband. And many of you are probably familiar that Land O'Lakes has convened a coalition around an initiative that we call the American Connection Project, which was really initiated pre-COVID as a way to close the digital divide that we could see in rural America around the lack of broadband. And for us, as we are a farmer co-op and our owners are living in rural America, and we want them to have vibrant businesses and futures and be able to run their business efficiently, we could see the impact of not having broadband. But COVID has dramatically accelerated this as we all have moved home and think about whether you are trying to have a virtual telemedicine meeting with your doctor, or you're doing schooling from home, or your kids. And so it has been really important for us to take that platform in this moment of time and really develop this coalition that is helping to federally advocate for broadband in rural America. So we're excited about that. So lots that has happened. I will say I'm so proud of the Land O'Lakes team. It has been incredible agility to really leverage the diversity of our portfolio. We sell both at retail and food service. Both of the teams, depending on where you sit in the division, you might be feeling great or you might be feeling not so great. But I think, as Doug said, it will all come back eventually. And so how we're working with our customers and managing through this time has been something that has made me really proud to be a part of the Land O'Lakes team. And I'll be happy to answer any questions as we get to that portion. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Heather, for sharing those insights and the experiences of Land O'Lakes. Our third panelist this morning is STACEY FOWLER, and STACEY is with us in the studio today. STACEY is the Executive Vice President of Research and Development for Schwan's company. STACEY is responsible for research and development, food safety and quality, technology development, product innovation strategy, and cross-business growth platforms. STACEY, thank you for joining us, and we welcome your comments.
Thank you so much, Rod. It's fantastic to be here at the Ag and Food Summit. Really appreciate the invitation to participate as a panelist. Tamara, thank you. Really was interesting listening to your presentation earlier, as well as Shannon Schlex from AURI. So much incredible themes as we have overcome so many hurdles as an industry in both food and ag. And it's just so impressive as I reflect back in terms of what has been overcome. And to have a forum like this where we can openly discuss these challenges and the key learnings so that we can strengthen our food and ag connection and ability to execute as we go through challenges in the future. So I am representing my colleagues today from the Schwan's company. We are a large manufacturer of frozen foods, and we have a nationwide footprint where we are both in food service and retail. So it has been an absolute journey from March onward to get to this point. So I'd like to focus in on a couple of the key areas that are very much a priority for us. And the first being safety. Our employees' safety, our customer and our business partners as we approached learning about the COVID pandemic. Safety has always been a key concern for our organization, so it's been institutionalized, embedded in our culture over years in the making. So, we felt very strongly at the very beginning of the pandemic that we had a responsibility as a food company to make sure that we could continue to manufacture our food and get it to families throughout the United States, recognizing our critical role as an essential industry. To do that, we made a decision early on, again, to focus in on our employees, our business partners, and our customers. It was our absolute top priority, and communication and transparency were paramount in that process. This required us to reevaluate everything that we were doing, and we listened very closely, like all of you, to the CDC guidelines that were being issued, and we quickly changed how we worked in order to reduce the risk of spreading the virus. We also had to design in new best practices to handle positive cases. We knew it was only a matter of time before an employee would get COVID-19. Our goal was to make sure we had measures in place to reduce the risk of the virus spreading in the workplace, which led us to develop many new safety procedures. For example, we asked all of our office employees to work from home. No easy feat, given the need to adapt to new technology, such as the Microsoft Teams platform, which some people weren't entirely used to working. We were fortunate that we just had implemented this new IT infrastructure to more effectively work with each other remotely. We required that employees follow the CDC guidelines for hygiene and social distancing. We asked everyone to social distance. When this was not possible in an area, we put physical barriers in place, and I'm speaking more about our manufacturing factories. We secured and issued PPE for our frontline workers. We instituted screening processes and created designated work areas for employees in our manufacturing facilities to help with the contact tracing. We also enhanced cleaning methods and started proactive disinfectant fogging at all of our production facilities. A second area is supply and demand. We basically ended up taking our forecast and throwing it out the window, like so many others. We had to really think quickly about redesigning our operations to go from more retail and less in the food service arena. given the restrictions that were out there in food service. Our portfolio was connected through our manufacturing, so that created a lot of challenges. We absolutely had to make sure that we were keeping up with this unprecedented demand on the retail side of our business and to continue to provide service for our retail customers and our food service. By and large, our frontline teams have done an amazing job to help us maintain good service to our customers, and so far, because of our employees' efforts, we have not lost a single production day because of the pandemic. Additionally, we have a direct store delivery integrated distribution model, which has been a tremendous advantage to us during this pandemic. It has given us greater ability to serve our customers with speed, frequency, and agility that they demand, and proved to be a competitive advantage for our company when our competition was struggling to keep product on shelf. You probably all recall seeing, perhaps live or through the news outlets, empty shelves at the store. Clearly, there was a run on certain products, and we happen to have a large portfolio of items such as pizza, America's favorite food product, and with consumers being at home and wanting comfort foods, we wanted to make sure that we had our product on shelf at all times. Also, like a lot of manufacturers, we had to prioritize our most popular items and focus production efforts on those items to maximize our production efficiency and keep us up with this retail surge. So from an essential learning perspective, and in order to make sure that we've got future resiliency built in, we believe that many consumer food attitudes and behaviors will be permanently changed as a result of this pandemic. We are going to continue to monitor these consumer preferences so that we can be agile and respond quickly to the marketplace. As an example, there is a need for more individually wrapped food service items as you think of what's happening in schools, given the need for more transportability and group feeding and the efficiency that goes with it. Ensuring that our production lines have back-end packaging flexibility to enable quick diversion from bulk pack to retail packaging is another area to consider, to have that back-end flexibility so that we can quickly pivot from one channel to the next. So we have to design that in, especially as we're looking at new production lines, which, by the way, we are in the midst of building a new 400,000 square foot factory in Salina, Kansas. And so as we were learning through this COVID crisis, we really had to think quickly about how we're going to design in all these new health and safety requirements. So that is very much a key learning, as well as continuing to work on renovating our existing facilities. We also learned that it's important to engage members of the community to help spread information on preventing COVID-19. In Marshall, Minnesota, for example, we worked with the city, chamber, and health experts and the business community as a whole to hold broad community dialogue and discuss emerging best practices. So that's what I have. I'm really looking forward to the additional discussion.
Well, thank you, Stacy. I thought each of our panelists had really great insights to lead off to our conversation and continued discussion this morning. You each had some examples of how you made changes in your organizations to respond to the marketplace or to respond to processing within your facilities. And a couple of you commented on how you didn't know you could do it that way. And I think that was one of the great learnings along the way, is how quickly we found we could make adjustments. Not that it wasn't painful or challenging along the way, but we found we could make adjustments when we needed to do so. And I think each of our organizations is going to benefit from that longer term, as well as our overall industry. So we're going to start out with some questions for our panelists this morning. As you can see on your screens, I believe you're also able to type in questions on the chat side of your screen, and we'll come back to those in a little bit. Stacy, we're going to start with you on this next question. and each of you talked a bit about some disruptions that you had in the organization. Sometimes that's on the supply side, sometimes that's on the demand side. But I am interested on the supply side of the organization. Do you have any plans to be building redundancy into your input supply chain because of the challenges that you faced during this last 9 months and the pandemic? And if you do so, please share some examples if you can.
Yes, thank you for that question, Rod. So as I consider redundancies to help with the assurance that we will always be as efficient and productive as possible given future potential disruptions. So as I reflect back, ingredient supply is very important to make sure that we have second, sometimes third suppliers in place to make sure that in case our suppliers have problems that we can quickly pivot. I think the other thing is making sure that we're as simplified as possible as we're considering our ingredient portfolio that goes into our finished good items. So simple things such as pepperoni, mozzarella, can we use those ingredients in multiple food products? Additionally, as I think about the need for individual wrap products, and if we can sell more food service items in retail, you do need to have things such as a scannable UPC code. So we are making sure that we're considering putting the UPC codes on new items as well as existing items as we change, so that we can cross-pollinate. So that has been very effective. I mean, we definitely had some stranded raw materials through this process, and we worked very hard to make sure we had no waste. We also had some finished goods that didn't have a home for them that we were able to fortunately donate to. One area would be Second Harvest Heartland, where we sent a semi-load truck of pizza that went to this new concept, the Minnesota Central Kitchen, right here in Minneapolis. So that was utilized. Additionally, we sent a truckload of pizza to a manufacturing facility that we have in Stillwell, Oklahoma, that was then distributed to schools. So I'm very thankful that we were able to find homes for these ingredients, but also for the most part, we were able to utilize everything so that we did not have any waste.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, as a consumer, it's really easy. All I do is go to the grocery store and the shelves are full, and there's a lot of work behind the scenes. Heather, let's turn to you with the same question about redundancy in your input supply chain.
Yeah, I think it's over the last many years, we have moved to really reduce kind of inventories and like throughout the entire supply chain, right? So, and we've gone to, in some cases, single sourced ingredients as a way to negotiate a better price or for cost savings or what have you. And so I think this year has identified some areas of opportunities and risk for us, frankly. So we had a situation earlier this summer where one of our cup producers for our Cozy Shack puddings is down in Louisiana. When the hurricanes came through, the plant was down, and it was not, as my supply chain folks tell me, a simple like bring a generator in. It was much bigger than that. So they lost power, and they were down for several weeks. And as my supply chain folks came back, they said, okay, so we're going to run out of product for cups, and so we will be out of product and shorting our customers in 3 weeks. And it was really eye-opening for me that we didn't have an alternative source, that we were that tight on our inventories. But I think that is what has happened over the years, and we've made those intentional choices, whether they be a cost choice or a supplier choice or what have you. And so I think as we are kind of stepping back and taking a look at where are we single sourced, where do we need to build redundancy, and we'll often talk about what we call our power SKUs, so the ones that are really important, that impact significant amounts of our business and profit, and are we doing the right kind of risk reward analysis to understand where we need secondary supply, and where we're willing to take a risk if we don't have it and understand that. And I think it was just a good a good wake-up call to revisit that discussion. And we might still make the same choices, but I think having that discussion is important and something that we'll continue to do at Land O'Lakes.
Maybe a quick follow-on to that, Heather, because you talked about single sources reducing costs. So I assume you're getting into the conversation about, well, what is the willingness to have a higher cost if it means greater safety and redundancy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the risk-reward trade-off discussion that we need to have. And so, where is there risk in our portfolio, and what are we willing to live with, and for what cost? And so, I think that is really important, and I think that has driven a different conversation this year as a result of not only COVID, but in this instant, a weather event. And of course, there's been lots of weather events in 2020, as well as the pandemic, right?
Thank you. Doug, same question for you. I know you mentioned in your comments an experience, maybe not a positive experience with one of your suppliers.
Yeah, I would, a couple things. We have 100 manufacturing facilities globally, and they are spread globally. We've had a lot of experience over the years because we are in Asia. We're one of the frontline folks in pandemic situations. So we certainly went through SARS, MERS, and some of the other earlier, if you will, let me say, trial runs. These are quite severe in the geographies they impacted. They just didn't expand as COVID has. So once COVID hit, I mean, we immediately got in new protocols in all of our 100 plants, which involved also masking each of our employees. And I would say we also have protocols for our frontline folks who are taking care of customers around the world. And the reason this is important, I think everybody mentioned this, you can't keep operating and you can't keep serving our customers who are also essential providers if we can't keep our stuff running. So our results to date on COVID is we've unfortunately lost 3 people to COVID. They've died. That's 3 out of 50,000. That's a death rate of 6 in 100,000. Minnesota's running in the 40s. The country's running in the 70s. So we're either 10x better or 6x better. And we look at this because we want to make sure that we are providing a safe environment. And honestly, all 3 of the folks, none of them contracted on premise with us. They contracted somewhere else. I only throw this out because there's this ongoing debate about opening work sites, et cetera. There's this view that it's somehow unsafe or less safe than not opening them. I'm not sure that statistics bear that out, quite honestly. Now, stresses. I mentioned, yeah, we were single source with a supplier who proved to be not reliable. And we look at single source in 2 ways. Security of supply, if it's single source, single plant, then you've got much higher risk. If it's single source, multiple facilities, then I think you've got a different risk equation. And so security of supply is obviously something we are relooking at, and particularly in the high demand areas of hand sanitizer, hand soap, where we literally had 4 and 10x spikes in demand. We expect it'll settle down to like 2 to 5x on a going basis. But trying to up ramp that type of, and to meet that type of demand will always show you cracks. So we talk bottlenecks. I would say it was appropriate for us because a key part that goes in our bottleneck proved to be the choke point for us. And so we found we were unfortunately single sourced, single site, and they could not up their capacity. And so now we have upped their capacity by doing it in our own facilities that we have around the world, where we had the ability, if you will, to change. Now we'll end up sorting that out. But I think every time you go through one of these situations, you're going to learn that you have capabilities you didn't expect, be pleasantly surprised, and you're going to find situations that you did not expect to be problematic. And those you've got to address and then rethink, I would say, what is it about your planning that led you to overlook that potential risk area so that you make sure you adjust that as well.
Okay, thank you. Heather, we're going to start with you on this next question. I know you commented a little bit on this in your comments. Did your company, did Land O'Lakes change packaging or products to redirect from food service to retail And if so, what did that look like in the organization, and will you continue that redundancy going forward?
Yeah, I think immediately we did some things that were probably one-time type things where we had inventory of food service products that we moved through the retail channel. So an example of that is we have a 1 pound prints, they're called, of butter, which is the 1 pound block. So it's not cut into the individual sticks that we sell to the food service channel. Butter has been one of those categories that's up and has been up significantly all year as consumers have moved into in-home cooking and baking. And so we had customers that didn't have butter on the shelf, and they were willing to take that 1 pound print of inventory that we had on shelf. So that's probably not going to continue. The one piece that I think we've really focused on, and STACEY mentioned this too, is the single serve or individually wrapped. So we have a variety of products in our food service portfolio. Some of them are bulk. So for example, we might sell a 50-pound bulk bag of macaroni and cheese to a school system that's serving, via the cafeteria. And we also have string cheese and cheese sauce cups and individual cups of pudding. And so we have shifted significantly to that portfolio as that has grown, as the way that we're feeding within the school system is different. And on college and universities, more that grab and go type opportunity. There are places, like I said, in the delis, for example, that, maybe that does shift more over time to a prepackaged bag of pre-sliced deli cheese versus going up to the counter and waiting in line and getting that product. So I think there were some immediate things that we did. I think there's some lasting trends that we'll be watching. And then I think there's also opportunities for us in the future to think about some of our food service portfolio and how it can be repackaged to meet retail demand, especially if we think about consumers really sticking with some in-home cooking and baking habits that they formed during this time. So I think that's opportunity yet to come as well.
Thank you. Doug, has that retail food service shift affected Ecolab and the changes that you've had to make?
Well, we've had to support a number of customers who've had to make big shifts within their manufacturing facilities to, if you will, move to more retail product from food service. So we have certainly been involved there. We serve most of the major food retailers from a food safety and hygiene standpoint throughout this country and frankly other geographies around the world. So we had to up our capabilities there because the hygiene standards they were working to meet were higher in the COVID environment. So suddenly you see people cleaning carts that didn't happen before. You see foggers and you see other technology. I would say we forwarded a number of in-process antimicrobials that we had been developing over the years and now have the most approved for COVID-19. We've got the fastest kill claim in the country in 30 seconds. I mean, if you compare this to stuff you buy on the retail shelf, that might be 4 minutes. And so we're using our hospital expertise, if you will, to develop antimicrobials for food service, for food and beverage, and for others. This has always been true, but we talk about it in a much more straightforward way at this point in time to make sure people understand the benefits of the technology. So I would say those are the big changes. But we had big shifts of demand within our facilities, much like you're hearing from Land O'Lakes and Schwan's. While ours was in food service to retail, we had huge shifts in terms of different platforms, hand care in particular, lower demand for warewashing and food service temporarily, et cetera. So there is a lot of work that went in our manufacturing facilities to shift folks from one line to another, to up shifts. We've added lines. We've looked for third parties. I mean, we've had to do a number of things to meet demand in this environment.
Okay, thank you. STACEY, how have you had to respond?
Well, very quickly, we have a very large school business, and so that was something as we considered our operations and our manufacturing line. We had some task force set up. One I led, which was titled very generically manufacturing asset reutilization. And so it really opened up our eyes in terms of our overall footprint and our network, in terms of how quickly could we concentrate efforts to go from the food service production to the retail production. And I would say it went very, very fast in terms of our ability to calculate where we needed to produce, as well as doing the priority SKU pass so that we could make sure that we were as efficient as possible, because we knew there was this demand surge. We were basically selling at Super Bowl pizza levels for weeks on end. And it was just an unbelievable effort to make sure that we could secure supply to produce. But as I think about where food service is at right now, schools, it's better, and we're seeing signs of improvement. But as we think about making sure that we are fit for purpose in the future state, having manufacturing flexibility is just, I think, paramount, as well as having some types of shared SKUs wherever possible, shared ingredients, the simplicity aspect as you're dealing with being a manufacturer, and wanting to make sure that we're operating both safely but absolutely operationally efficient, and then meeting the needs of our customers. And then also working with our customers over the course of time. Consumer trends have shifted a little bit, and the needs have shifted from a functionality perspective. We just got to make sure that we're designing in all those aspects into the products that we're selling. So it's a work in process.
Thank you. Each of you have large workforces. Doug, how has the pandemic impacted your workforce, health, and safety measures that you're planning for within your organization?
Well, we certainly implemented a number of protocols which are specific to COVID. I would say safety has been a core value of the company, and employee safety for a long time. It's how we open every meeting, is safety statistics and a safety moment. We have driven down safety events dramatically over the last 10 years, where we're best in class in a number of key areas. And so I think that ethic and that culture helped a lot in establishing new protocols around COVID. And back to the statistics I cited earlier, while we don't want to lose, obviously, anyone, we want to make sure that our environments are honestly safer than any other environment they're going to be in, and the people understand the inherent risks with COVID. So we equip people with new capabilities around masks. We give masks to every one of our employees. They get masks every day. We've shifted around there. We shipped out hand sanitizer, which we produce and we were short supply to every one of our folks, including wipes and everything else, all the stuff you couldn't find on the shelf, because we wanted to make sure that they had the ability to not only be safe at work, but to make their home environment as safe as possible. And obviously, this is extended into our customer conversations. So in food and beverage, historically, what we've really been focused on is food safety, and we'll continue to. We've got the largest antimicrobial portfolio against things like Listeria, Salmonella, E. coli, and the like. But we've also now really talked much more in depth around employee safety, particularly in specific industries where people are shoulder to shoulder. What can you do to make that environment more safe? We have some similar operations in other parts of our manufacturing facilities. And so we shared what we learned there and how we've created a safe environment in those places too, even when physical distancing is more problematic or more difficult. So all those things have come to bear, and I'd say we feel very good about the steps we've taken. We are still learning. We've changed our physical environments. They will probably remain changed. Everybody is going to look differently at the person walking in the meeting room, sniffling, coughing, and sneezing, even post-COVID. I think our tolerance for this is going to go way down. And so while we always said, don't come to work if you're sick, let me just say the adherence to that prior to COVID was spotty at best, and we will expect much different adherence going forward.
Okay, thank you. Heather, how about Atlanta Lakes, the workforce issues that you've seen there?
Yeah, I would say similar to Ecolab in that, of course, for our frontline workers, for the people in the warehouses, for people who are driving trucks and shipping product, I mean, all of the safety protocols have been put in place, and employee safety is the top and paramount objective for us. And we've had, we certainly have uh, folks out for exposure, folks that have tested positive, and we do the quarantining and all of that. So that has been terrific. And I think what our data has shown is where our employees are contacting or contracting COVID is not within our facilities. So that's been good. So that's all very similar. What I would say from a headquarter perspective, we are not back in the office yet, and so we're still working virtually. We have done things like extend our emergency leave benefits for employees. We are tracking PTO just to ensure that people are taking breaks and using up their vacation time, so that we're encouraging that of our employees. We have a 24-hour HR hotline that is there to take calls. We have our employee assistant line. So we're really trying to surround employees with the, very fundamental areas that we've talked about, like the PPE and the contact tracing and all of that, all the way to really thinking through kind of the employee's whole life and understanding that everyone's in a individual situation and what can we do as an organization to help them during this time. So that's been challenging and a good opportunity for us to kind of get to know everyone's situation a little bit.
Okay. Thank you, Heather. Stacy, how about at Schwan's?
Very similar to Doug's comments as well as Heather's. I think for us, everyone's lives have been forever changed. We will never go back to the way it was. And I think people, they mourn that, but it is what it is. And because we have collectively taken actions to improve the environments, to keep people safe, people feel confident and safe and secure when they do go into work. I believe our frontline folks have confidence, and that all happened through training and transparency, frankly. And then from an office perspective, we're still working remotely from home. We don't know when we'll be back. I know from a cultural perspective, people want to be back. They enjoy that face-to-face interaction like we all do as humans. So there's a little bit of mourning of loss. We do the best that we can each and every day, leveraging the technology that we have. And so we're going to continue to learn and implement better ways and methods as we go through time.
Well, I think you're right. There's some fatigue out there about the separation, but we have to work our way through it. We've been talking about some of the challenges, but there were some positive things that came out of COVID and the learnings as well. And so I'm interested in what kind of pleasant surprises you learned within your organizations that you may have taken away from the pandemic in 2020. So Heather, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you. I think if you would have told me that, mid-March, we were all going to go home and work from home, and yet we were going to feel closer than we've ever been, I would have scratched my head a bit. But I think that has been a very pleasant surprise. I think moving to the virtual environment has been fairly seamless, and I think there's been a lot of benefits, especially for folks that are not at headquarters, that are now feel more connected and feel like they have more influence. So I think that just the camera has been kind of a game changer. And the way we think about communication has really changed. I think we were really structured in our communication in the physical office, and yet there were a number of people that were on the phone or were calling in or virtual. And I think that will forever change how we think about that communication, and really catering it to a much broader audience in lots of different settings, right? Whether you're in the room or virtually. I think the other thing I'll say is because decision making was happening so fast, we really pushed it down through the organization, and that sense of empowerment I think has been terrific and has given the team confidence in a way that has allowed us to, make fast decisions, have the impact in the marketplace. If we made mistakes, then we could quickly correct them. And I think that empowerment factor was something that was a pleasant surprise.
Thank you. Stacy, how about Schwan's?
So I think the greatest surprise was just, being part of how everyone rose to the occasion. And I say that as a Schwan team member. I was so incredibly proud of my colleagues, of everything that they did from a hands-on perspective. So the creative thinking, the fast acting, just coming together. So inside of the Schwan's company, just great collaboration and communication, and we were able to make a very quick right-hand turn. And we've come out of it, I think, very, very well. I think the other thing that I'm grateful for or surprised is just the community spirit, Minnesotans coming together. Minnesota Business Partners was a great vehicle for getting communication and having best practice sharing between government officials and companies such as ourselves, as well as universities, and just making sure that as a state of Minnesota, and I liken it to the MBOLD aspect that Joanne had spoken about earlier, these coalitions, how we can come together and make a difference and unite, that to me is a great thing and quite inspiring.
Thank you. Doug, how about Ecolab?
Yeah, a lot of similar themes, I would say. Certainly quite pleasantly surprised at how well the virtual world worked. I wasn't so worried about our technology. I was very worried about, if you will, the pipes in the ground laid by Comcast et al. And would they hold the new demand coming from different places? And I would say really quite remarkable in terms of how that technology did work and we were able to operate. I'd say on an even different level, the power of purpose. So our purpose around cleaner, safer, and healthier, and our teams rallying around how they're going to help customers continue to operate in a very difficult environment, how they pivoted. And I think we all have these great examples. I would say I'm particularly proud just broadly, while I'm very proud of Ecolab, I'm proud of the business community writ large. I think the business community stepped up in an amazing way. I think they worked to make sure that they could meet big shifts in demand, big shifts in channel, and do this in a way that also protected their people. These aren't easy acts. And I would say, I think the business community has been much more flexible, much more agile, and much more effective in managing through this and also learning as we go. There's a lot we know today that we didn't know 6 months ago. I don't think we give ourselves credit for it. We're operating in a different fashion as a consequence. And so I, salute all of my customers and everybody else that's made this possible.
Okay, thank you. We got about 5 minutes left in this segment. We got one more question for the group, and then maybe we have some other questions that have come in. So looking outside your organizations, maybe more broadly for the state of Minnesota, is there anything that we should be doing as a state to foster needed change based on what we've learned these last 9 months? Stacy, you want to start with you?
Well, like I mentioned about the Minnesota Business Partners, and I think forums such as what Agrigrowth is sponsoring today, let's keep the dialogue going. Let's strengthen the relationships. We have common ground of mutual benefiting interests. Making sure that we are really putting those tough challenges front and center. Things that together we can solve, but it's breaking down barriers, and that's where I think the pandemic really offers us this opportunity of a lifetime to strengthen how we operate. And the food and egg space is so paramount. It is a critical industry in general, or industries and all the supporting partners that go with it in the food supply. Ultimately, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And so in policy matters, making sure that we've got great practices, sustainability, as well as the ability to ensure that we are efficient and ready for a crisis such as what we've just hit. So we are stronger together than apart, and we need to unite in new and different ways.
Thank you. Doug?
Yeah, I would, I guess we use a metaphor in the company, and they're particularly helpful. And this one is when you go through an event like COVID, and it's a Chinese proverb, which is don't follow the waves, look for the current. And if we start looking and started dividing things into waves and currents, I think COVID is a big wave that can easily knock you off the key currents and take our eye off the ball. And so currents like economic shifts around the world with population growth, middle class growth in key markets and the rest are still true. And we still need to make sure that we are doing things to advantage ourselves and capitalizing on those currents as a state, as an industry, et cetera. There are consumer currents around clean labels, organic, et cetera, that we've got to continue to be cognizant of and understand how do they impact us. They're not overnight, but they keep building, if you will, over periods of time. They're environmental. And so water scarcity, which is going to be a huge issue for many parts of the world and for producers all over the world, this is still real. None of that shifted. Water wasn't magically produced as a consequence of COVID and made this issue go away. So we got to continue to make sure we understand those risks as well. And then finally, I just say social. There has been an ongoing, if you will, buildup of divide in this country, but not only here in other parts of the country. We do have economic unfairness. We've got injustice issues. We've got parts of our communities that feel completely disenfranchised from our models and everything else. And if we don't solve this, invite them in, make it work, then we are going to continue to see this divide grow over periods of time. And I think businesses have to understand this is their problem too. That if we want to create the right culture within our company, we've got to make sure that we're taking care of injustice outside of our company, because the two are absolutely related over time. So it's just a cautionary tale that we need to continue to work on all these other issues, not just COVID. Solving COVID is important, but it's not going to solve everything. And our future is long, and we got to make sure we stay on these issues.
Thank you. Heather?
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to both of those comments. I think those are really right. So I think having forums like this is helpful to get together. I think remembering that we are a mighty group of folks. We live in such a terrific state that has all this breadth of industry, and I think having the or being brave, I will say, to really voice the topics like Doug just did, and really to tackle them is I think where we make progress. And I agree. I think in the COVID time period, we're very heads down trying to get ourselves through this time period, and we have to pop back up and remember that there are broader, bigger issues. And one of our mantras, I would say, at Land O'Lakes is we're all together better. And as a cooperative, of course, that's one of our core values. We are all together better. That is kind of a core value of being a cooperative. And I think that resonates for our state and for our industry as well. And so we do have some big, meaty issues that we can solve, and we can do it together. Forums like this help, but really voicing those issues helps as well, because then it helps to break them down and start to tackle them.
All right. Thank you, Heather. And Tamara is telling me that we need to keep rolling, and I'm sorry we used up all of our time, but I thank the panelists for your insights and really your transparency of talking what each of you have experienced and the impacts on your organizations. I think that helps all of us in the agri-food industry learn. And we've each gone through our own path of learning these last 9 months, but doesn't mean we can't learn from one another and continue to strengthen our organizations going forward. So thank you, Stacy and Doug and Heather, for your comments today. This is going to wrap up our morning program. Just a couple of reminders before we take our first break.